The municipal courtroom buzzed with a low, restless murmur, the kind that always settled over the early morning traffic docket. People shifted in their seats, clutching paperwork and citations, glancing nervously toward the judge's bench as if trying to calculate the exact moment their name would be called. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering every few seconds in a way that made the room feel both sterile and weary. It was the kind of place where time seemed to stretch, where judgment felt inevitable, and where every person waited with the same mixture of dread and faint hope. Judge Marianne Alcott flipped to the next case file in her stack, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. She had a reputation, strict, unshakably composed, but fair. She believed in consequences, but she believed in context, too. And it was that balance she tried to maintain as she scanned each file for the facts behind the fine print. Her eyes paused on the next name. Case 42, Hannah Ruiz, she read aloud. Failure to renew vehicle registration. Fine, $375. A few people glanced up as a young woman rose from the back row. She moved with stiff, careful steps, as though trying not to draw attention, though the nervous energy radiating off her made that impossible. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose, hurried bun, and a worn canvas backpack hung from one shoulder. She clutched a stack of papers tightly against her chest, the edges wrinkled from being handled too many times. When she reached the defendant's podium, she tried to offer a quick smile, but it faltered almost immediately. Ms. Ruiz, Judge Alcott began, her voice steady, it says here that you missed 2 renewal deadlines and were issued multiple notices. She glanced up. This isn't typical for someone with no prior infractions. Can you explain what happened? Hannah nodded quickly, though her throat seemed too tight to speak. She inhaled, exhaled, and tried again. Yes, Your Honor. I lost my job last month. Her voice wavered on the last word. She swallowed hard and continued. I've been sending out applications, interviews, too, but everything is taking longer than I hoped. I've been using what little I saved to keep my daughter in daycare so I can look for work. When the registration bill came, I just didn't have enough for both. She pressed her lips together, her composure slipping. I wasn't ignoring the notices on purpose. I just kept thinking I'd catch up the next week. And then the next. The judge studied her for a moment. She wasn't one to be swayed by theatrics, she'd seen plenty over the years, but Hannah's unease wasn't theatrical. It was raw, unpolished, and heavy. The kind of fear that came from juggling too many fragile things and hoping none of them hit the floor. You brought documentation with you? Judge Alcott asked. Hannah quickly nodded and shuffled through her stack with shaking hands. Yes, Your Honor. I have proof of my job applications, the interview confirmations, even the letter from my previous employer about the layoff. She slid the papers toward the clerk, still trembling. I didn't want to come here empty-handed. As the clerk handed the documents to the judge, the courtroom quieted further. A few people leaned forward, sensing that this case, unlike the $100 parking violations or routine speeders, might unfold differently. Judge Alcott scanned the papers, flipping through the printouts with a slight furrow in her brow. It was all consistent. Verifiable. And more importantly, it told a story, a simple one, but a real one, someone struggling, not someone avoiding responsibility. Ms. Ruiz, the judge said at last, her tone softening almost imperceptibly, it's clear to me that you've made efforts to correct your situation. These documents show initiative, not neglect. Hannah's shoulders lifted as she took a shaky breath, a quiet, desperate relief beginning to seep into her expression. Given your circumstances, Judge Alcott continued, and your lack of prior offenses, I'm inclined to waive the full $375. A ripple of quiet surprise rolled through the courtroom. Someone in the back whispered, lucky, though not unkindly. Hannah's eyes widened, glassy with gratitude. Your Honor, thank you. I don't know how to. Before I finalize this decision, the judge interjected gently, raising her hand, I need to ask, is there anything else you'd like to tell the court about your situation? Anything that might be relevant before I close this case? Hannah froze. For the first time since she stepped forward, she hesitated. Her eyes darted to the floor, then to her hands, twisting together at her waist. It was clear she was debating whether to speak or stay silent. Then she lifted her gaze to the judge, took a small, trembling breath, and said something no one in the room expected. The silence that followed Hannah's confession stretched across the courtroom like a fragile thread, holding every breath in suspension. "I was sleeping in my car," she'd murmured, but the weight of it settled heavily on everyone listening. This wasn't the kind of admission people expected in a traffic court, certainly not the sort of person volunteered unless they had run out of every other option. Judge Alcott didn't speak right away. Her fingers stilled on the edge of her bench, and for a long moment she simply studied the young woman before her, not the case file, not the violation, but the person. She saw the exhaustion tucked into the corners of Hannah's eyes, the way her shoulders curled inward as if she'd grown used to shrinking, the tremble at the edge of her jaw that spoke of nights without sleep and days spent fending off fear. "You were sleeping in your vehicle," the judge repeated at last, her voice quieter, as though adjusting itself to what it had just learned. "Where's your daughter right now?" "She's with my sister," Hannah said, brushing the back of her hand quickly across one eye. "I didn't want her to see me like that. I told her we were staying with family friends for a few days. I didn't want her scared. I didn't want to make her feel like we'd fallen apart." Her breath hitched, and she swallowed hard. "I just needed a little time. I thought I could figure something out before things got worse." Judge Alcott leaned forward, her hands clasped. "How long were you living in the car?" 9 days, Hannah whispered. "Then it got towed. I wasn't parked anywhere dangerous, I made sure of that, but the grocery store manager said I'd been there too long. I didn't have enough money to get it back. And without the car, I can't take my daughter to school, or get to interviews, or," she faltered. "It feels like everything collapsed at once." A shifting rustle moved across the courtroom, not of impatience this time but of attention, people straightening, softening, listening. Even the clerk paused her typing to glance up. Judge Alcott exhaled through her nose, steadying herself. Her voice, when she spoke, was firm but warm. "Ms. Ruiz, I asked you earlier if there was anything else I needed to know before finalizing my decision on the fine. I'm glad you answered honestly. What you've told me changes the entire context of this case." Hannah nodded weakly, her eyes lowering. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I know this probably isn't the place to." "This is exactly the place," the judge interrupted gently. "Justice isn't only about rules. It's about understanding the circumstances under which those rules were broken." She closed the case file, but instead of the sharp thud one might expect, it landed softly, deliberately. "I am not going to simply waive the $375, she said, and a few heads jerked up, startled. Hannah's breath stopped in her chest. "You're not?" "No," Judge Alcott replied. "I'm going further." The room grew impossibly quiet. "Based on your situation, I'm expunging the violation entirely. It will not appear on your record in any capacity. Additionally, this court has access to housing resources designed for individuals facing sudden displacement. I'm referring you to our emergency outreach liaison immediately after this hearing." Hannah blinked, but the tears came too fast to contain. She covered her face with one hand, her shoulders trembling as she tried to pull herself together. "I can't believe," she shook her head, emotions tangled in every breath. "I didn't expect anything like this. I thought maybe you'd give me a payment plan. That's all I hoped for." "You deserve more than another bill you can't pay," the judge said calmly. "The liaison will assist in placing you in temporary housing today, and in securing longer-term stability. They can also help you retrieve your vehicle or find alternate transportation, depending on what you need." She softened her tone further, her voice nearly tender. "You've carried this alone long enough, Ms. Ruiz." The bailiff stepped forward carefully, almost gently, holding the intake forms. He offered them to Hannah as if handing her something fragile. She accepted the paperwork with shaking fingers, her tears falling onto the pages faster than she could wipe them away. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered, still